All right, welcome to the Get Real podcast. I'm Austin, your host. Today we have Chris. He's a gentleman I met yesterday talking about San Antonio. We got into a slight debate. I thought, you know what? I need to have someone on my podcast who also knows a little bit of basketball, change things up a little bit. If you want to follow him or meet him, he's at Dr. GGP on Twitter. Chris, how you doing? Thank you for stopping in, man.
Yeah, no problem. I'm doing fine. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. So I guess we got plenty to dig into here. I guess where I mainly come from is I've seen a lot of just blatant. It seems like, okay, now that the boogeyman or the big bad team that was San Antonio, since that dominance has gone on for so long, now people just seem so quickly just to jump in and just tear down this team apart. Let me ask you, where are you coming from San Antonio's situation, what Pop's doing, what's been going on? Where do you fall in all this?
I was so thrilled the year that they went to the Western Conference Finals with Kawhi there, and I was on board with at least what it looked like they were trying to do. I kind of if there's an analogy, it reminded me a lot of when the Lakers had Shaq and Kobe, and then they traded Shaq and they started building around Kobe, and they had a faster, more full court team. They got Gasol, and then they won those two championships, and they sort of just modified the offense a little bit. And I saw similarities of that with Kawhi, how they, now that Tim Duncan was leaving, they were going to build around Kawhi, and they were going to have this more up-tempo offense, full court offense. So that point in time looked great. I was a big believer that they could have taken out Golden State had it not been for Zaza and that injury. But leading up to that, there were, to me, questionable decisions by the front office and even coaching. And so I think that's sort of where the seeds were planted with this whole Kawhi exodus situation. And I think since then it's been handled poorly. And while I agree that there's fault on both sides, I strongly believe that we are not hearing the entire story, and that a lot of this could have been resolved, at least in my opinion, through better planning, better off-seasons, I would say, trying to get Kawhi some help.
Okay, that's some very interesting points. Now, I think it's going to be tough for any of us to ever hear a story because you got two things. Kawhi doesn't talk. He doesn't talk. Everything, every rumor, every comment has basically been from quote-unquote Kawhi's camp. And on the other side, you have the Spurs organization where you just don't hear anything. They keep everything in-house, maybe to a fault. I don't know if we'll ever hear the story until it's some secret documentary 20, 30 years down the line. To address a few things, and if I take any of your quotes out of context, please feel free to correct me. But when you were suggesting that you didn't blame Kawhi for not showing up because the team was so bad, I was thinking, well, damn. I mean, they faced the Rockets, and then they beat the Rockets in Game 5, having to sit Kawhi out, and then in Game 6, they won by 40 without him, bringing them to the Western Conference Finals. I was thinking, man, that team couldn't have been that bad. But I see your points. I mean, the contract with Mills and Gasol wasn't prudent. I mean, but to say they haven't really tried to build that team, I don't know if I agree with that, because they go after 2015, they get the big fish. They get the biggest guy on the market in LaMarcus Aldridge. And then in 2016, I know they made a run at Kevin Durant. They tried to get him in, and he just wasn't interested. I honestly think the only reason he gave him a courtesy interview was because of their success. I don't think, outside of being drafted to OKC, I don't think Kevin Durant's going to be on a small market team anytime soon. I don't think that's just who he is. And then we look at, losing Jonathan Simmons and then Dedmon, and those guys, I can't argue they would have been better, but to me, they're just role players. You look at what they've done since. I mean, Dedmon in Atlanta, he's putting up decent numbers. These guys don't average more than 20, 21 minutes per game, and then Simmons, especially this year, has been pretty poor. I mean, his percentages are at an all-time low, so I just have a hard time thinking, I don't think we'd be any better with those guys on board, honestly.
I think, you look at the ways Dedmon and Simmons are playing for Atlanta, for the Magic, and of course their numbers look bad. But as far as the sheer talent of those players, I will give Popovich credit for this. I think he can take those players who do have X amount of talent and really make them flourish in that system to the point where they are going to look really good. They're going to look exceptional. My argument is that when you look at a guy like White, or you look at a guy like Bryn Forbes. Just the talent level, the athleticism is just not there.
Right.
So yeah, you can put them in this system all you want, but they're just not going to be as good as a Dedmon or a Jonathan Simmons in that system, because they have that natural athletic ability, they have those tools, they have that talent. And so part of where I feel disagreement is the fact that I think it just appears as if the front office can take anybody, some Joe Schmo off the street, and make them into a good player. And granted, they can make them into a somewhat good player, but there's a certain point where you have to have talent. And yeah, I'm saying, you do need a X level of talent. And I think that they have a system where they can take players at that X level of talent and make them look good, like a Jonathan Simmons or Dwayne Dedmon. But then there's players who just aren't going to cut it, and these are your third stringers. These are your guys like a Bryn Forbes or a guy like Derek White, where it's just not going to be there at all. And you just can't get these guys to develop talent ad hoc. There has to be something there. And so that's where I feel like the deficiency lies.
Now, again, we're going to be basing most of this off rumors, because we're never with this team we never get definitive answers. But the word is that Dedmon and Simmons wanted to go somewhere else, wanted a bit more freedom to do what they want, according to the reputable reporters like Michael Wright out there. So they couldn't. Those guys didn't really want to stay. So it's like we can't keep them there. And then they go to, and this happens to the Spurs constantly. Guys either get offered more money or they want more freedom, and then they go to other teams and flop. Best case, you're typically a Corey Joseph or Kyle Anderson, to where you just sustain where you're at. And it's, we can't make them stay. We can't make them keep them there. And the only other thing is that we went after every big fish. In 2015, it was LA. In 2016, it was KD. We were looking at Chris Paul, but he ended up being traded to Houston. So it's just like, we can go after anybody we want, but in terms of small market teams, it's still in that kind of phase to where, for small market teams' sake, this is as good as it gets in terms of the amount of success. I mean, outside of San Antonio, there's really 3 other teams in the entire NBA that had that level of success, and even then, it's not really that recent. I mean, with Boston's level of success, a lot of it was during the Bill Russell era when he won 11 rings, and they had the big 3 with KG and Pierce. They got 1 ring out of it. And they got Los Angeles, and Kobe was fine. They did good. Still missed a few postseasons. Were a lottery team towards the end. Had some really bad seasons where Kobe's like, get me the hell out of here. And then he named teams like Chicago and San Antonio to go to. And then you got the Michael Jordan Bulls, and it's freaking Michael Jordan. So I'm thinking, in the grand scheme of things, I mean, if we're just not beating the MJs and the in teams like Boston that won 11 rings in a row, I mean, I think there's mistakes, but in the grand scheme of things, I think for every pop error, there was just this genius like trading up a backup point guard for Kawhi freaking Leonard, and then getting Davis Bertans as a second-round pick, and now he's still playing on the team, which is just the craziest steals. And then you got your Parkers in the late first round, DeJounte Murray in the late first round. And I think Derek White, I still have a bit of hope on him. He's 23, 24, 6'4" guard with a 6'10" wingspan. First year on the Spurs. I mean, last year he spent the entire year in the G League. So half these players on the team were either not on the roster or were on the roster but just not playing. So I wonder if we'd be feeling this rush of we should just blow it up if Murray was healthy, if Rudy Gay didn't miss like 10 games because of that bruised heel, if Pau Gasol wasn't out since November 4th, we just got Derek White back, and we're still waiting on Lonnie Walker. I mean, if all those guys are healthy, I have a hard time seeing that, hey, especially with Houston flopping until recently and Utah flopping until recently, we wouldn't be a 4th or 5th seed right now, and this sensation of panic wouldn't be hitting us.
I agree to some extent. Now, when you talk about some of the big moves that the front office has made in the past, you look at a guy like Tony Parker, for example. What is his name? Sam Presti. So Sam Presti was the guy responsible for really advocating for Parker there. And then you had, what was the assistant coach's name? Chad Forcier, who had been working with Kawhi and with Kyle Anderson and sort of developing their games. He's gone now. So paradoxically, the Spurs have always, they've gotten really good help on the side, but then they do so well that they don't keep these guys there, like a Chad Forcier or
Mike Budenholzer, Brett Brown.
Budenholzer, Brett Brown, all these guys. And so, again, now you're left with, it just feels like, okay, you caught the emperor naked now. Some of the big brains behind some of these moves that were done in the past are gone from the team, and now this is...
Right.
That said, I do agree that, there were a lot of unfortunate things this year. You look at Deontay Murray's injury and Gasol being hurt and Rudy Gay's heel. Rudy Gay has been an exceptional player this year, and I every time I watch him play, I'm just so worried his heel, whatever, will completely go out, and then to me it's going to be Tank City, because I think he at least gives them some kind of competitive edge. But yeah, I mean they've had some effective decisions, but by far. Now, as far as comparing them to like the Bostons or the Chicagos or some of these other teams that have had also a lot of championship success, I think they have done well for a small market team. I think I give them leeway, especially in the early part of when they were starting to build around the big three. In 1999, I think they did it exceptionally well. The year after, Duncan got hurt, so you really couldn't do anything about that, and that was fine. I think where I really started getting a little bit frustrated with the front office was sort of after the 2005 championship, in the sense that it was becoming a popular place to get free agents in San Antonio. After they beat Detroit, they got Michael Finley, they got Nick Van Exel, they were able to get Fabrizio Alberto on their team, and so on paper they were the most talented team that year in the 05-06 season, and then they ran into the Mavericks, and to me that was just a terribly coached series where to me that 06 year should have been a repeat. I just don't see why they lost to the Mavericks. They so many ways to have beaten them that year, and it just didn't work out. And then going a little bit further, 2013, Game 6, I mean, I'm sure everybody, talks about it ad nauseum, but there were just a series of bad decisions made. But nonetheless, I feel like they are light 2 championships, which, I mean, you look at where they are right now with 5. I mean, you could have had one more championship than Michael Jordan's Bulls. I mean, that's insane. And now if we're in this period where, the team will be treadmilling and we have to kind of wait for players to develop and see what happens and then kind of go from there. I mean, I feel like it's a bit less satisfying that we've arrived here so abruptly, because of, it makes you look back and say, damn, I wish I had those other 2, or, if this would have gone this way. But nonetheless, I agree. This season is going to take some time for sure.
I think part of that is kind of a slippery slope, because if you look at those mistakes, I mean, I agree there's mistakes, but there's not a single coach that won't make a mistake. That logic can kind of be applied to almost any big team. I mean, what if Steve Kerr didn't hit big shots for MJ, or Robert Horry for his respective teams? I mean, it could have fallen either way, but we can say that 06, they followed that up with a championship. And 2013, I mean, yes, he should have put Duncan in, but also Danny Green was not in position. He admitted fault to that he should have been covering Bosch on that rebound a little bit better instead of doing some other things. And then, I don't know if you saw Sports Science break down ESPN, the probability of that Ray Allen shot going in, and Tony Parker's right on his ass. I mean, statistically, that was just a crazy-ass shot. But then, we might kill Pop for those mistakes, but the following year, 2014, and I say this ad nauseum, that's the same roster, a year older to an already older team. They beat that team that beat them in 7 and beat them in 5, and then no one averages over 30 minutes that entire series. Parker's your leading scorer at 16 points per game. Kawhi's at 12 a game. He's still good. He's just not the Kawhi that we know now. I mean, they got guys like Patty Mills and Tiago Splitter. Boris Diaw was cut from Charlotte. I mean, these guys are not world beaters, and he took that 60-plus win team, beat OKC, beat the Trailblazers, had trouble with Mavs in that first series, but then beat LeBron in 5, and it's just like, well, he made the mistakes, but he made up for them in just a big way. And so I think I feel like kind of nitpicking when we're coming to Pop because Phil Jackson makes mistakes. I mean, there's a lot of mistakes, and their players will tell you MJ will rip on some Phil Jackson, and so will Kobe. I mean, so these mistakes, I feel like they just don't warrant the blatant, and I'm not saying you're being this, but I'm just mainly seeing this from other people, the blatant disrespect of saying, oh, Pop is trash, he's terrible. The fact they won 47 wins last year is nothing short of a miracle. And like I said, if Murray and all those guys were healthy this year, I don't think we'd be freaking out hitting the panic button.
True. I mean, we'll have to see what happens this year. And to me, it seems like a very odd year in the NBA. I mean, because I'm not sure we saw that Houston would be doing as poorly, or look at New Orleans. I mean, almost the entire division that the Spurs are in, a lot of the teams are just not where they should be. So, I mean, if anything, this is at least the best season to not have a good record.
Right.
So, I mean, we will tell, after November and kind of see where things lie. I think the other, some of the other losses they've had, Milwaukee, for example, or some of the ones that have gone down to the wire and a shot was made or a shot was missed. I mean, that's going to happen. Those are kind of 50-50 wins or losses. But it's just it is a little bit of a scary trend to be blown out those times and then to barely eke by a struggling Chicago team.
Right.
But we'll see. We'll see what happens. I mean, they can easily get it together. I know that Lonnie Walker is coming back, so that might, inject some life into the bench and kind of redesignate roles for some people, and they may be playing more
And it looks like Jakob Poeltl's kind of coming along in his own there too. So I mean, there's a small foundation there. Jakob Poeltl, he had a rough start. He started to turn it around. You got Lonnie Walker. You got DeJounte Murray. They got 2 picks, albeit mid to late picks. They have some guys, some talent. Jakob Poeltl's starting to come along. I kind of wish Pop would give more minutes, and hey, he might have to if Pau Gasol's out for any longer. Lonnie Walker, DeJounte Murray. They got 2, first-round picks this year, and not the best draft class, but it's a draft class that's just flooded with 3s and 4s, just forwards, and that's something we need. And then there's always some options. You can always, you get some cap space. I think Gasol is only guaranteed for $6.7 million this next offseason, so you can waive and stretch him. You can probably attach a second-round pick or 2 for Mills because he's still a plus player to me, and give him to a team like Atlanta who could use some championship veteran leadership, and he's actually not that far away from that playstyle type of a Trae Young. So there are ways to kind of eke out some cap space, maybe throw in a Chris Middleton, figure out things like that. Now, there will be tough decisions down the line if they want to keep going with DeRozan or L.A. I respect the hell out of L.A. for making this thing work and then communicating with Pop effectively. The way he handled his trade request and Kawhi did is night and day. And he left his organization in Portland to come to San Antonio, so if anything, he had a more reason to be pissed. But he handled it in a really professional manner, and then they got him paid, and it worked out for him up until about 2017. So there's still options, and most likely Pop might retire this year or next year anyway, just because the game doesn't seem interesting to him anymore. His wife's gone, Big Three's gone. Yeah. At that point, you might look like at a Ime Udoka or Messina, who I'm personally a fan of, who was a killer coach overseas, has a great relationship with players in the NBA right now, more of an impressionable guy. So, I mean, I haven't said you said this, but other people make this out, but like, it's over, it's done, they're crap, they might as well be the Bobcats of the West, that kind of shit. So it's just, I think there's some sort of hope to dwelch from, but you might need to buckle down for one tough season.
Yeah, and I think that's fine. You gotta, I think you have to maintain the right expectations. I mean, nobody was expecting this team to be Golden State at all. But then there is an interesting debate here, because should we be embracing the tank philosophy? Because, hey, I'm on board. If you want to get Zion, go for Zion. That is awesome. More power to you. Or is this team going to try to get into the playoffs? And to do that, at least the way it looks right now, it does seem that they need to make some trades. Maybe things turn around in the next couple of games. I feel like this is a moment, this is a particular low point where I think either you kind of rally the troops together, you get behind everyone, and this could be a tremendous learning experience for people, or it goes downhill from here, and I guess we'll find out in the next couple of days.
Absolutely, and Chris, I would like to have you on down the road if you're up for it, and just to see
definitely.
where we can evaluate that.
Of course.
That
Perfect.
sounds
good. That sounds awesome. All righty. Well, I want to thank you for having me. I actually have to get back to what I'm doing in a little bit, but this was really awesome.
Awesome, Chris.
It was, my first podcast here, so there you go.
Fantastic, and I'll definitely send you that
right.
link when this is uploaded and set, and see what you think about it, and we'll see if we can get you on soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Chris.
Yeah, have a good one.
All right, you too. All right, everybody, and that was the Get Real podcast featuring Quist. I will leave a link in the description for his stuff on Twitter if you want to check him out. Thanks for you guys for tuning in. Let me know what you guys think, your opinions. Leave some comments in the comment section. Let me know what you think. And as always, this was the Get Real podcast.